Hi, it's Sidney here again with part 2 of chapter 7 of Pinocchio by Carlo Collodi. As you remember, Pinocchio had just locked the polecats in the trap. It was Pinocchio who had shut it, and for greater security he put a large stone against it to keep it closed. He then began to bark, and he barked exactly like a watchdog. Hearing the barking, the peasant jumped out of bed, and taking his gun, he came to the window and asked, "What is the matter?" "There are robbers," answered Pinocchio. "Where are they?" "In the poultry yard." "I will come down directly." In fact, in less time than it takes to say amen, the peasant came down. He rushed into the poultry yard, caught the polecats, and having put them into a sack, he said to them in a tone of great satisfaction, "At last you have fallen into my hands. I might punish you, but I am not so cruel. I will content myself instead by carrying you in the morning to the innkeeper of the neighboring village, who will skin and cook you as hares with a sweet and sour sauce. It is an honor that you don't deserve, but generous people like me don't consider such trifles." He then approached Pinocchio and began to caress him, and amongst other things he asked him, "How did you manage to discover the 4 thieves? To think that my Melampo, my faithful Melampo, never found out anything." The puppet might then have told him the whole story. He might have informed him of disgraceful conditions that had been made between the dog and the polecats, but he remembered that the dog was dead, and he thought to himself, "What good is accusing the dead? The dead are dead, and the best thing to do is to leave them in peace." When the thieves got into the yard, "Were you asleep or awake?" the peasant went on to ask him. "I was asleep," answered Pinocchio. "But the polecats woke me with their chatter, and one of them came to the kennel and said to me, 'If you promise not to bark and not to wake the master, we will make you a present of a fine chicken ready plucked.' To think that they should have the audacity to make such a proposal to me! For although I am a puppet, possessing perhaps nearly all the faults in the world, there is one that I certainly will never be guilty of, and that of making terms with and sharing in the gains of dishonest people." "Well said, my boy," cried the peasant, slapping him on the shoulder. "Such sentiments do you honor, and as proof of my gratitude, I will at once set you at liberty, and you may return home." And he removed the dog collar. As soon as Pinocchio was released from the heavy and humiliating weight of the dog collar, he started off across the fields and never stopped until he had reached the high road that led to the fairy's house. There he turned and looked down into the plain beneath. He could see distinctly with his naked eye the wood where he had been so unfortunate as to meet with the fox and the cat. He could see among the trees the top of the big oak to which he had been hung. But although he looked in every direction, the little house belonging to the beautiful child with the blonde hair was nowhere visible. Seized with a sad presentiment, he began to run with all the strength he had left, and in a few minutes he looked and reached the field where the little white house had once stood. He saw a marble stone on which was engraved the words, "Here lies the child with the blue hair, who died from sorrow, because she was abandoned by her little brother, Pinocchio." He fell with his face on the ground, and covering the tombstone with 1,000 kisses, burst into an agony of tears. As he wept, he said, "Oh, little fairy, why did you die? Why did not I die instead of you? I who am so wicked whilst you were so good. And my papa, where can he be? Oh, little fairy, tell me, where can I find him? For I want to remain with him always and never to leave him again, never. Oh, little fairy, tell me that it is not true that you are dead. If you really love me, if you really love me, your little brother, come to life again. Come to life as you were before. What can I do here alone in the world? Now that I have lost you and my papa, who will give me food, where shall I go to sleep at night? Oh, it is much better, 100 times better, that I should die also. Yes, I want to die." Just then, a large pigeon flew over his head, and stopping with distended wings, called down to him with a great height, "Tell me, child, what are you doing there?" "Don't you see I am crying?" said Pinocchio, raising his head towards the voice and rubbing his eyes with his jacket. "Tell me," continued the pigeon, "amongst your companions, do you know a puppet who is called Pinocchio?" "Pinocchio? Did you say Pinocchio?" repeated the puppet, jumping quickly to his feet. "I am Pinocchio." "Do you also know Geppetto?" he asked. "Do I know him? He is my poor papa. Has he spoken to you of me? Will you take me to him? Answer me for pity's sake. Is he still alive?" "I left him 3 days ago on the seashore." "What was he doing?" "He was building a little boat for himself to cross the ocean. For more than 3 months the poor man has been going all around the world looking for you. He has now taken it into his head to go to the distant countries of the New World in search of you." "How far is it from here to the shore?" asked Pinocchio. "More than 600 miles. 600 miles? Oh, beautiful pigeon, what a fine thing it would be to have your wings. If you wish to go, I will carry you there." "How?" "Astride my back." "Do you weigh much?" "I weigh next to nothing. I am as light as a feather." And without waiting for more, Pinocchio jumped on the pigeon's back, and putting a leg on each side of him, he exclaimed joyfully, "Gallop, gallop, my little horse, for I am anxious to arrive quickly." The pigeon took flight, and in a few moments had soared so high that they almost touched the clouds. They flew all day. Towards the evening, the pigeon said, "Oh, I am very thirsty." "I am very hungry," rejoined Pinocchio. "Let us stop at that dovecot for a few minutes, and then we will continue our journey, that we may reach the seashore by dawn tomorrow." They went into a deserted dovecot, where they found nothing but a basin of water and a basket full of vetch. The puppet had never in his life been able to eat vetch. According to him, it made him sick. That evening, however, he ate to repletion, and when he had nearly emptied the basket, he turned to the pigeon and said to him, I never would have believed that vetch was so good." "Be assured, my boy," replied the pigeon, "that when hunger is real and there is nothing else to eat, even vetch becomes delicious." Having finished their little meal, they recommenced their journey. The following morning they reached the seashore. The pigeon flew quickly away and disappeared. The shore was crowded with people who were looking out to the sea, shouting and gesticulating. "What happened?" asked Pinocchio of an old woman. "A poor father who has lost his son has gone away in a boat to search for him on the other side of the water, and today the sea is tempestuous and the little boat is in danger of sinking." "Where is the little boat?" "It is out there, in a line with my finger," said the old woman, pointing to a little boat which, seen at that distance, looked like a nutshell with a very little man in it. Pinocchio fixed his eyes on it, and after looking attentively, he gave a piercing scream, crying, "It is my papa! It is my papa!" The boat, meanwhile, beaten by the fury of the waves, at one moment disappeared in the trough of the sea, and the next came again to the surface. Pinocchio, standing on the top of a high rock, kept calling to his father by name, and making every kind of signal to him with his hands, his handkerchief, and his cap. And although he was so far off, Geppetto appeared to recognize his son, for he also took off his cap and waved it, and tried by gestures to make him understand that he would have returned it had he been possible, but that the sea was so tempestuous that he could not use his oars or approach the shore. Suddenly, a tremendous wave rose, and the boat disappeared. They waited, hoping it would come again to the surface, but it was seen no more. "Poor man," said the fishermen who were assembled on the shore, and murmuring a prayer, they turned to go home. Just then they heard a desperate cry, and looking back they saw a little boy who exclaimed as he jumped from a rock into the sea, "I will save my papa!" Pinocchio, being made of wood, floated easily, and he swam like a fish. At one moment they saw him disappear under the water, carried down by the fury of the waves, and the next he reappeared, struggling with a leg or an arm. At last they lost sight of him, and he was seen no more. "Poor boy," said the fishermen who were collected on the shore, and murmuring a prayer, they returned home.